The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.
The campaign says that Bernie Sanders had a heart procedure for artery blockage, is canceling events until further notice. Here it is. Senator Sanders is conversing and in good spirits. He will be resting up over the next few days. We are canceling his events and appearances until further notice, and we will continue to provide appropriate updates, end quote.
Our boy, Bernie Sanders is, well, you heard the report. That was actually from Fox News, who I have to give them credit. Following that alert, they gave a reasonable and responsible bit of coverage on this issue. But as you heard, Bernie Sanders has been hospitalized and has already undergone a surgery to install 2 stents because of a blocked artery. He complained of chest pains at a campaign event yesterday and was rushed to the hospital and got immediate care. A lot to talk about, but first I want to pause and just kind of say positively. I'm confident that Sanders is going to be fine. He'll be back on the campaign trail, but only if he, okay. That's the show is getting ready to go sideways, folks. I just want to put it there. Let me start with the story. Back in 2016, I was one of the few people, actually 2015, I was one of the first people to get access to the video of Hillary Clinton collapsing on 9/11. Now, I was a part of a network at that time, not a YouTube network, but a publishing. I was writing articles at the time. I was part of a network, and I'm like, guys, this video is huge. This video is news. It's huge, and everyone needs to see it, and we should share it. And they told me straight out to no, that they would not. They wouldn't share it because they did not want to lose access. If they shared that video, they would lose access. True story. So I shared it on my own YouTube page. It didn't go as far. I mean, by that time, other platforms picked it up and they shared it, and it was a viral video, and it was news. It was news. It was political news as much as it was anyone who might have been concerned about her health or anyone who was looking for an advantage because of her sickness, which many people were. Now, the reason I tell you that story is because regardless of what happens and who it happens to, I just kind of feel the urge to talk about it realistically. I have the urge. It's just in me. I don't necessarily play favorites with anyone. I do wish Bernie Sanders a speedy recovery. I think if anybody can whip it, it's going to be him. He'll probably be back on the campaign trail sooner than the doctors would want him to be. That's your boy. That's Bernie. At the same time, you have to look at the politics of this. I don't think under any circumstance his campaign is going to end. All right, let's make sure that that's clear. But depending on how this health situation actually plays itself out, I mean, that's a question. That's a realistic question. And I mean, that's a very straightforward, realistic question that Bernie and Jane have to answer for themselves. And then the campaign is going to have to just do whatever Bernie decides is in his best interest. I think that's a fair assessment. There's a flip side of this, how this is going to play out politically. Because while everyone is really nice, I mean, even the clip from Fox News, let me tell you, the clip from Fox News was extremely reasonable. The commentator that they had on there actually made quite the case that this is just normal. Sometimes it happens to people who are much younger than Bernie. Bernie never had a history of heart-related issues. And so there's people who are much younger than him who have had to get stents. You get it fixed and you move on. That's almost a quote verbatim. And I think that's the appropriate coverage, especially coming from Fox News, right? I have to give them some cred on that one. No telling though what they're going to say tonight after the regular hours, after the regular news hour, if you want to call it regular news, and they get to the commentary. Not only that, right now all the campaigns are speaking very positively about this, but realistically, let's not pretend like they're not going to use this to their advantage. I would. I'm just going to, call a spade a spade. If I was on Kamala's team, or if I was on Tulsi Gabbard, who we'll talk about in a second, and her love affair for Donald Trump, if I was on her team, I would absolutely use this to my advantage, because there are real questions about his ability to make it through up against Donald Trump, who apparently does no exercise and eats whatever he wants to eat and lives forever. At least that's the image that they're portraying of him. So what am I saying? I'm saying that we have to be prepared for all eventualities. And we can't just cover our ears and not pay attention to the story in a certain way because we don't want to speak negatively. We don't want to jinx it or anything like that. We just have to be very realistic. What is a campaign? What does a primary look like without Bernie Sanders? I think that's a question that is reasonable to ask. I was going to talk about today how the polling for Bernie is not looking well, not looking good at all, particularly in New Hampshire. He's coming in third. But I'm going to table that conversation, not for the entire show. I'm not going to wait till tomorrow to talk about that. I'm going to talk about it after this musical interlude, because we just have to, we got to look at these things realistically, and not be drug into echo chamber commentary. We cannot allow ourselves to be deluded and then subsequently to be disappointed because we bought into echo chamber commentary. Okay, that's what you come to me for. Even if you get mad at me, somebody's already throwing something at the computer screen already. I get it. I'm fine with that. We ebb and we flow in terms of support. We ebb and flow in terms of patrons. People come, people go. But at the end of the day, I've got to just be consistent and tell you that, setting aside the health question, which was never really a question until today, but that's kind of life, man. Pause. I just want to say this, life is really, everybody on this listening to me understands that life is like this, right? Everything is good until one day it's not, and so it was never really a question of Bernie's ability to navigate the campaign and at his age, his ability to serve as commander in chief. None of it was ever a question until all of a sudden today, now it is a question. But it's not one that we will allow to be used politically, which is why I wanted to discuss the political ramifications of it, because we have to understand the strategy that will be used. But then also, not only will we not allow other people to manipulate this for political purposes, it's also incumbent upon us to be sober and to be realistic and to consider all the options and all the possibilities. That's the only way you can be successful in anything, and not have something surprise you. You got to consider all eventualities. And with that being said, we do have to consider the fact that we don't know how this is going to go. He may very well be back on the campaign trail in a week, 2 weeks, a couple of days. Hell, he might be back on the campaign trail Sunday. I don't know the recovery time. I don't know. Everybody's recovery time is different. But there's also the possibility that he may not recover as quickly as we need him to. And last but not least, let me say this. As important as Bernie Sanders is to the movement, to the revolution, as important as he has been to the national conversation. We're talking about Medicare for all in 2020 when no one would remotely talk about it in 2016. And that's because of Bernie Sanders, right? Let's just call a spade a spade. Many of the things that we're talking about today that are extremely progressive are because Bernie Sanders stuck his neck out there and changed the discourse and shifted the Overton window. That being said, let's be careful how we navigate this as supporters of Sanders, as fans of Sanders, or whatever you call yourself, however you label yourself. And let's be forgiving if he doesn't go the distance, right? But then more importantly than that, let's not put any additional pressure on him to go beyond what his health can handle. Right. Let's not let us and our determination for the type of revolution that he wanted to bring lead to even more damage. Let's not push him back onto the stage quicker than he needs to be pushed onto the stage. The real question that I posed last year or 3 years ago, really, actually, I did kind of cover this before. We talked about this. I always ask the question, who's the heir apparent? Who's the next person? Who's the person that can continue the revolution in the absence of Bernie Sanders? And when I say in the absence, I mean simply just not in the front. Who's the go-to person? We need to answer those types of questions regardless of what happens with this procedure.
Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show.
And as always, I like to take this moment in the show to thank all of our patrons and to announce all of our newest patrons. If you want to be a part of this uber elite, uber just chic and beautiful and in the most intelligent group of people in the entirety of the universe, not just Earth, forget Earth, like throughout the entire universe, beyond the observable universe, there is a group of people who reign supreme over them all, and they are the patrons of the Benjamin Dixon Show. Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show. Special thanks to Derek S. You are our newest patron, and you are today's MVP. Thank you so much for supporting the show. And really, listen, seriously, all jokes aside, special thanks to every single patron. I know personally how difficult it can be to have a recurring support of anyone. You know, financial times get hard, commitments, and then sometimes your creator just isn't producing a lot of content. I mean, I rightfully lost, I don't know, maybe 300 patrons over the last 2 years because I was unable to provide consistent content. I get it. No harm, no foul, not even upset about that. So I get the difficulty to be a supporter of someone. And so I say that because I want you to know how much I appreciate it and how much we can't do it without you, and how much we're going to go back and find those 300 people I lost over the last 2 years. But I digress. So listen, again, I just want to put this out here about Bernie. I think he's going to be fine. I think he's going to be back in the race, and that's going to be that. I think it's going to be a testament to how strong he is. But I also think that we have a responsibility to be extremely sober about it, that there's a possibility that, this is not a little thing, especially at his age. It may be a little thing for a young person. It might be just more traumatizing because they're young and they're having to get a stint. There's all kind of things that go along with this, but it is a complicated thing at his age. And I think it's only reasonable for us to ask the question, who's next? Who's up next? Who's the heir apparent that can carry the progressive message with the same fierceness and tenacity? Because if nothing else, we have to give Sanders 100% credit for all of the progressive movement that we see. And when I say movement, I don't mean individual movements and collections of people. I mean the movement of America from right to left, that shift that has taken place on the national discourse, or in the national discourse. I think it's only reasonable for us to credit Bernie Sanders with that. Now, all that said, let's talk about these polls. Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about the polls, because as I was digging in and as I did my episode yesterday, I got a lot of pushback. People are like, "Oh, you're just lying. Ben, you're lying." And I'm like, have you guys looked at the data? When yesterday's episode was unpopular-ish, quite a few people appreciated the candidness and the truthfulness, but in general, it was a little unpopular by the just how many people recoiled at the title of yesterday's episode without even listening to the episode. And that's fine. That kind of proves the point that we were making. But the reality is like, let's set aside Bernie's health. Let's set that aside. I think Bernie's going to be fine. Now that that's been established, let's talk about these polls and why even regardless of how this turns out, Bernie he's behind. In Iowa, the first caucus to come up, the first primary, the first day to vote, February 3rd. In Iowa, right now it's Biden 20%, Warren 22%, and Sanders at 11%. That's according to 538.com. Also according to realpolitics.com. New Hampshire, which is second to vote. I mean, New Hampshire, folks, that's right there by Vermont. Joe Biden, 24%, Warren, 25%, Sanders, 11%. Now, listen, there of course, people are going to say, oh, that's the mainstream media, right? And that's manufacturing consent. And that's just what the people, they're not polling young people. Listen, they have, listen, and then I even hear excuses. People say, oh, they only poll 500 people. Folks, it's a scientific method at this point. You don't have to poll 10,000 people to get an accurate representation. All right. In polling, it's not. All right. But the polls are showing that Bernie is not doing good. And we have to ask the question, why? Why is Bernie in third place in New Hampshire? Let's go a little bit further. In South Carolina, it's even worse. Biden is like blowing everyone out. 37%, Warren 17%, and Sanders at 8% in South Carolina. Right? And South Carolina votes February 29th, all in the month of February. Right? So we have to, okay, let's keep going. In national polling, this is as recent as today. Biden's at 25%, Warren's at 28%, Sanders is at 15% national polling. That's a Monmouth polling. Economist YouGov has Biden at 22%, Warren at 28%, Sanders at 13%. Warren is on the rise, but Biden has a significant stranglehold. He has a strong, solid, a commanding presence still to this day. And we have to pause and say, like, what is going on? And that was the purpose of the conversation yesterday that a lot of people just rejected outright. They just they didn't want to talk about it. They don't want to believe. Okay, you don't want to believe that? I want to pull up a couple of sources that show. And of course, you're going to, if you want to excuse it and be like, bias, this source is biased, then of course, you can always dismiss any source that's saying something that you don't like. But that is the same as listening to an echo chamber commentary. And then you turn out to be surprised. And what happens when people get surprised and something comes out of the blue, it's like, there's no way Bernie could lose because everyone was telling you he could win. Kyle Kalinske, my friend, relatively speaking, colleague in this industry, he's telling you Bernie's going to win. Right? Anyone who's just all they're doing is telling you that Bernie's going to win, or all they're doing is attacking other people without honestly analyzing the situation that Sanders is in. If that's all you listen to, then of course it makes sense. The only way that you can explain why you were wrong or why it didn't happen the way you thought it was going to happen is to say that the DNC rigged it. That's really it. When all you listen to is positive commentary about who you like, when you get bad news, you're so shocked by it that you believe anything that helps comfort you. And I'm not in that business. I've never been in that business. You know me. All right. So dismiss this source if you want to. But according to CNN, Joe Biden, they predicted this way back in May of this year. And they explained that Joe Biden is eating into Bernie Sanders' coalition. Literally what we were talking about yesterday. Now, I'm still waiting on the polling expert to come on the show, and we're going to try to get a chance to talk about the most recent data that shows that. But back in May, they were discussing that Bernie Sanders is losing a percentage of non-college educated whites to Joe Biden. Joe Biden is taking not only black people, like I discussed yesterday, older black people, but Joe Biden is getting a huge portion of Bernie Sanders voters white Bernie Sanders voters who don't have a college education. And it has always been the case that Democrats have to perform relatively well in those groups, right? We won't win them. Democrats never really win white people in general, and they certainly don't win non-college educated whites. But every coalition that has won has had to have had a representation in the non-college educated white category. That's where Joe Biden is literally taking votes from Bernie Sanders. Now, here's the actual paragraph I want to read to you from this article. Our latest CNN poll shows that Biden is strong with non-college educated whites as well. Biden jumps from the low 20s amongst whites with a college degree to the mid 30s among whites without a college degree. Comparably, his lead over Sanders increases from only 5 points to over Sanders among whites with a college degree to about 20 points among whites without a college degree. Now, that was back in May. All right. That was a long time ago in terms of politics. September polling. The Atlantic reported the same exact phenomenon. All right. This is what the Atlantic.com said. They said, quote, 45% of Democrats and Democratic-leaning independents picked Biden as the candidate most likely to beat Trump, far more than those who selected Senators Bernie Sanders of Vermont, 14%, or Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts, who only had 12%. Biden's lead was slightly narrower among younger voters and liberals, groups that have been skeptical of him overall. But even with these voters, he still leads both senators by at least a 2-to-1 ratio. This is the key paragraph. Listen to this. With voters more favorable towards Biden, his electability advantage on that question expanded to huge proportions amongst voters older than 50, non-college educated whites, and moderates. The majority of each group picked him as the most electable. So the same phenomenon was happening in September, and while I don't have the specific data breakdown yet for October, I do have the most recent polling in October that shows that Biden is still ahead of Sanders, particularly in demographics that otherwise would be supporting Sanders. That's the distinction. That's why it's more important for us to talk about the fight against Biden than it is the fight against Warren, but we put all of our energy into the fight against Warren. These people who are supporting Biden are not going to support Warren. But they did previously support Sanders in 2016. So we have to ask ourselves the question, why? Now, I was talking to a friend of mine, whose name actually is Ben. Like, it's not me. I wasn't consulting myself, right? But I was talking to a friend of mine on Facebook about this. And he actually had a really great point that I did not consider, that perhaps a lot of the support in 2016 for Bernie Sanders was really rooted in just pure hatred for Hillary Clinton. Like people, Democratic voters who did not particularly care so much for Sanders, but they 100% would not support Hillary Clinton. That's the group. That is the group. And then, of course, we'll talk about the black vote in a minute. But the non-college educated voters who would not support Hillary Clinton under any circumstances, but they still wanted to vote for a Democrat, that is the group that has moved from Bernie Sanders in 2016 to Joe Biden in 2020. Like, I don't really, and then actually one last thing before I finish that sentence. Then, of course, older black people who generally vote with the Democratic establishment. And you could disagree with them, but they are clearly able to make it clear to you and elucidate why they support the Democratic establishment more than anyone else. Right. So let's not just dismiss them and say, oh, they have no idea what they're doing. I guarantee you have a conversation with them and they'll explain to you why. All right. But that's neither here nor there. The point of that data point, or the point of that anecdotal analysis, is to point out that Bernie Sanders is losing to Joe Biden because of two specific groups: non-educated or non-college educated white folks who supported him in 2016, but are not supporting him now, and they're supporting Joe Biden now. It's right there. It's right there in our face in the data, and we're not really talking about it. Instead, what we're doing is we're attacking Elizabeth Warren. And by attacking Elizabeth Warren, we're not bringing voters from Elizabeth Warren to Bernie Sanders. What we're doing is just weakening Elizabeth Warren, which ultimately means at the end of all of this, it could very well be the case that the strategy that's being employed by the majority of Bernie, and again, if you didn't think social media mattered, then none of you would be on there doing all the work that you're doing. And so the strategy of attacking Elizabeth Warren is ultimately a net win for Joe Biden. And because the added bonus is that we're not going after Joe Biden in any significant fashion, not remotely. What we're trying to do, and I understand the strategy, right? I'm not foolish, and I'm not going to be disingenuous and pretend like I don't understand why. What people are trying to establish with Bernie Sanders is that he is the real progressive in the conversation. He is the only true progressive that can do X, Y, and Z for America. And fine, let's argue that. That's fine. But that's not the argument. Apparently, that's not the argument that the voters who are going to be voting in these caucuses and these primaries actually care about. What they really care about is whatever the hell electability is, because they thought Hillary was electable, but then also they're just breaking for Joe Biden. They just are. And you have to ask, why? Why is that the case? And then what do we do about it? I think above, and now I do have to add this in here, man, damn it. This heart condition And I wish him a speedy recovery above anything else, man. I don't think people should sacrifice their lives for this crap of a country. I'm sorry. I'm just being honest. People would die. People will live and give everything they have to this country and then die, and this country will shit on everything they ever stood for. So I wish him a speedy recovery, even if that means he doesn't deal with us ever again. Because that's how America is. America I already said it, I'm not going to repeat it, but America is not going to look at someone's sacrifice and actually change its ways. It never does that. It co-opts them for the purposes of protecting the establishment, the political and economic establishment. Ask Dr. King. All right. Not comparing Bernie to Dr. King at all. But here's the point. The point is this, this heart condition is going to help. It's going to double down, and people are going to run with it. Not necessarily the media. I haven't seen it happen in the media yet. I was amazed and thoroughly pleased with how Fox News covered it when it was breaking news. I don't know what the hell they're going to do tonight on Hannity. No telling what. They might tie it to the Clinton family, trying to kill them off. All, knowing Fox News. But the point that I'm trying to make is that the people, the voters, will make up their mind for themselves. And it does not help that he has this heart condition now, that people will have an excuse to say, see, he wasn't electable all along. He was not going to be able to go the distance. And then they're going to throw their support behind a guy who's the same age, Joe Biden. That's because their support was already there. All right. So what do we do about it? Somebody said yesterday about the show that it was depressing. Yesterday's episode was depressing. What do we do about it is we hammer the living daylights out of Joe Biden because, one, he's not electable. Two, even if he was electable, he is not going to bring any type of progressive agenda, nothing remotely. He's the furthest right in the conversation, right? We hammer the living daylights out of Joe Biden. We don't weaken the person who's actually tangentially helping you, right? She's pulling a little bit from Joe Biden. If you look at Bernie's numbers seem to be pretty consistent. They're just not good. Elizabeth Warren moves up, but she's pulling not from Bernie. She's pulling from Biden. So we need a piece of that. And by we, I mean you people who are very publicly Bernie Sanders supporters. I'm just analyzing the horse race, right? I'm just trying to give you a strategy. Take my words with a grain of, I'm speaking the truth. Don't take it with a grain of salt. But anyway, the point is this. Get some of that Joe Biden support. Show the people why Joe Biden is absolutely the worst. Show the people why, because these are the people, you got to understand, these are the people who don't give a damn about who's the real progressive in the conversation. We've invested all of our energy into, Bernie Sanders is the real progressive. Meanwhile, they're like, bitch, I don't want a progressive. I want a standard fare, moderate Democrat. They are literally saying that. and these are some of the same people who are really skittish about the question of Medicare for all. And here's what I'm telling you is we can't win without them. I'm not telling you to go and triangulate votes with Republicans, right? And question people who are going to, throw children in cages. I'm saying go and solicit votes from people who are otherwise scared of Medicare for all, otherwise scared and afraid of socialism, otherwise afraid of democratic socialism and Bernie Sanders' style socialism. They're afraid of that. And it's because they're not interested in a progressive, or rather because they're not interested in a progressive. All of your conversations about who's the real progressive between Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren are for naught, because they're not looking for the real progressive. Does that make sense? Here it is in plain English, all put together. Number one, there are voters who supported Bernie Sanders in 2016 who are no longer supporting him, and they have gone to Joe Biden. They did not go to Elizabeth Warren. And number two, because you have invested all, or we or us and them or whoever, the social media ecosystem has put all their energy in trying to determine who, or make it clear that Sanders is the real progressive. You've been talking to a brick wall. You're preaching to the choir. The people who are looking for socialism are already with Bernie Sanders. The people who were with Bernie Sanders in 2016 because they just hated Hillary Clinton that much are now back with their nice and comfortable pick of Joe Biden. So where are you going to get your votes to get them up in the polling? You get it from Joe Biden. Because if these people supported Bernie Sanders once, they can do it again. They will do it again. And all you have to show them, first and foremost, and that's it. Joe Biden is not electable. That's it. We have to make that clear. That is the message more than anything else. Joe Biden is not electable. Period. Don't go into the conversation about, oh, well, the real socialist is Bernie. They're afraid of socialism. They are Democrats who are moderate establishment and they're afraid of it. And you need their votes to win because, look at the polling data. Okay, I'm done. I was going to play something from Tulsi Gabbard, and I think I will. I was going to call the show early a little today, even though we're 30 minutes in. But you've got to hear this shit from Tulsi Gabbard, and I'll play it for you right after this musical break.
My concern all along has been that impeachment has been something that has been used as a partisan talking point to undo the results of the 2016 election. My view has been and continues to be that the American people need to be the ones whose votes and voices defeat Donald Trump in 2020.
Do you think Democrats are stuck on trying to undo the results of the 2016 election?
I think there certainly have been a lot of voices who've been looking for a reason to impeach Trump because they did not want to accept the outcome of the 2016 election, which is unfortunate because it...
I don't even care what you said after that. That was the end of the clip. Listen, that is literally word for word the talking point that Donald Trump put out. That this is a coup. You know, remember that tweet thread? I didn't mention it on the show, but if you're paying attention, he threatened that impeachment was actually a coup. He even suggested that it was going to cause a civil war, but actually it was all wrapped in the veneer of the Democrats are trying to undo the 2016 election. And here, a Democratic candidate is actually parroting those same talking points. I think it's safe to say that she is not a Democrat. Not that that matters. You know, blue team versus red team doesn't really matter. But I think she's extremely dangerous and disingenuous, and she's catering to a crowd that she thinks that she can siphon off from Donald Trump. She is actually targeting Donald Trump supporters. And why that matters is because if you look at the Republican Party right now, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get that upset, but if you look at the money that they raised $125 million in the last quarter for Donald Trump's reelection campaign. They 100% support everything that Donald Trump is. They support how he is. And more importantly, they support what he's doing. And the things that he is doing is causing irreparable damage to this country, destroying the lives of people at the border, he's just a wrecking ball of destruction and mayhem. And these are the people that Tulsi Gabbard has in her sights to siphon off from Donald Trump. That is a problem. There's so many other problems with her. That I still haven't put my finger on. And a lot of people, the more I say I haven't put my finger on it, the more people give me their opinions and their thoughts. And I appreciate that, but I'm still trying to resolve it for myself of who she really is. But if nothing else, this video shows you that Tulsi Gabbard is really, hell, she might as well drop out of the race and run for Donald Trump's, his national security advisor, like Nico House, who's the #1 Tulsi Gabbard fan, suggested when Donald Trump got rid of John Bolton. He tweeted out that Donald Trump needs to stop playing and appoint Tulsi Gabbard as his national security advisor. At this point, when she's doing the work of Donald Trump, she might as well be in the campaign. She might as well be rather in the cabinet of Donald Trump. So anyway, that's today's show. I hope I haven't made I don't care if I made enemies, but I hope I haven't hurt you guys' feelings about anything. Actually, I don't care about that either, because what I care about is telling you the truth, whether we like it or not. And I think the truth has to be said. #1, Tulsi Gabbard is trash. That's the first truth that I want you to remember. And the second truth is Joe Biden is not electable. That has to be the talking point from every Bernie supporter. It has to be, because the people we need to pull votes from don't care who's the biggest progressive. They care about who's the most electable. That's why they're supporting Joe Biden. erroneously, the talking point has to be that Joe Biden is certainly not electable. And last but not least, super well wishes to our boy, Bernie Sanders. Wish him well. Hope he gets better. Sure he will, and he'll be back on the campaign trail. But I hope he doesn't come back any moment too soon. And he needs to take care of himself first and foremost. Talk to you tomorrow. Peace.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show. If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.